Hi all, welcome back. This is Yunus, and this is the second part of the video series which I have prepared for preparing for AWS Solutions Architect Associate Exam. In the first part, the link is given here. In the first part, I talk about how to go about preparation for the exam, and in this part, we will talk about some of the key topic areas from where frequently questions are being asked. This is not a comprehensive list. There will be questions from many topics, but we are just discussing a few topics which you may find it useful. Okay, let's begin. In the first part, we discussed about how to prepare for the exam, and in this second part, we are going to discuss about what are some of the frequently asked questions, or what are some of the areas from where you can expect questions in the exam. So I'm going to give some indicative topics. We will not discuss about the answers, or we will not discuss more details about that. This is just to give you some indication about the topics where you can focus on. So the first one is in compute, EBS volume types and S3 storage classes. You can definitely expect 5+ questions from this or more. For example, EBS volume types, the HDD backed volumes, SSD backed volumes, and which are the volumes which are the types which can be used as boot volume, etc. You should know. S3 storage classes, and what are the key features of some of the important storage classes. S3 standard infrequent access, one zone infrequent access, S3 glacier, etc. You should be clear about. If there is a question where out of the 4 options, the one talks about scale out to increase the capacity of your solution, scale out, or there is another one which says scale up, means instead of a T2 micro use T2 large or T2x large. I mean, that kind of scale up versus scale out, if you have to decide, most of the time scale out wins over scale up. So just keep that in mind. Again, that is a generic point. You have to see what is the exact question. And you should know the scaling policy types: target tracking policy, simple scaling policy, step scaling policy, schedule scaling, etc. and where these scaling policies are used. So just be aware of that. And how EC2 Hibernate helps or impacts EC2 with instance store. For example, you have a EC2 with instance store, but for next 1 week your company has long holidays and you want to stop that EC2, but when you come back you want to get back everything in your storage, you should get it back. So what is the way out? So you have to use basically Hibernate, but you can read about that, because otherwise instance store will get lost if you stop an EC2 instance. Instance store, actually the biggest advantage is the high IO performance. If you compare that with EBS volumes, the IO performance is like multifold. IO performance is very, very high compared to EBS volumes. So just keep that in mind. There may be a scenario given where you have to consider this fact before answering. Then elastic network interface. You should know the concept of ENI, and you should know that you can have a secondary ENI which can be attached to a EC2, and later it can be detached and attached to some other instance, so that the second instance can work like a standby for the primary EC2. So you have to read about it. You should know what is ENI. Then EC2 pricing options. Definitely you will have a couple of questions, especially sport instances. You should know what kind of workloads can use sport instances. Basically, any workflow that can withstand disruptions can use sport instances, and that is going to be the most cost-effective pricing option for EC2. Then load balancer related, you should know the difference between NLB, network load balancer, versus application load balancer, and path-based routing, how it is done in ALB. These kind of high-level details about the load balancer types you should know. Then placement strategies, spread, cluster, and partition placement strategies, and where exactly you can use, or some use cases for usage of these placement strategies you need to know. Then we are continuing with the compute topics. How to copy an AMI from region to region. For example, an AMI which is valid in North Virginia region cannot be used directly in AP South 1. You need to basically copy that AMI using a process. So the question here is, do you need to create a snapshot in the second region? You need to basically. Again, just read about that process if you have to copy an AMI from one region to second region. On-demand EC2 versus Lambda. In case if you have to choose between EC2 versus Lambda, most of the time Lambda will win, because that is more cost effective. On-demand price is very high, we all know. Then instance warm-up. It is useful in auto-scaling groups. The warm-up time lets your instances finish warming up before they contribute metrics data, which then impact auto-scaling decisions. If you don't have any warm-up period, immediately after an instance comes to in-service status, it will start contributing metrics to the auto-scaling group. It may not be yet ready for taking the traffic, but yet it is contributing the metrics to the auto-scaling group that can actually impact your scaling decisions adversely. So keep that idea in mind. Now from compute we are moving to database. DynamoDB and Aurora, they are more likely the answer compared to other RDS-DB engines if all of them appear together as choices in a question. Again, that is just a observation. You can't really say always DynamoDB or Aurora will be the answer, but you can see that okay, they have some specialty. In the context of databases, understand what is replicated synchronously versus asynchronously. Read replicas, is it replicated asynchronously or synchronously? If you are using multi-AZ from primary to standby, is it replicated synchronously or asynchronously? You should know that. Whenever, with respect to database, whenever question talks about columnar, think Redshift. That is a columnar database. And remember, multi-AZ is for improving high availability, not to improve the performance. So most likely you may see a question where you will have to remember this particular fact. Many people think multi-AZ is to improve the performance, but it is to improve the high availability. Then understand how Elastic Cache or DynamoDB Accelerator, DAX, or CloudFront Cache help improve performance. So you have to understand because there will definitely be question. Multi-AZ follows synchronous replication and read replicas follow asynchronous replication. This is in continuation with one of the points we just discussed in the previous slide. For live leaderboard sort of applications, sort of solutions, you can use solutions based on DynamoDB, DynamoDB Accelerator or Elastic Cache Redis. Just keep that in mind. Application is writing to RDS database too many times, and RDS database cannot handle that velocity. So how will you solve the issue? You can actually decouple the application from database using an SQS. So again, all these are kind of indicative questions for your consideration. Actually, once you go through 2-3 practice tests, you will get a feel of almost all the question areas. So that will be your best preparation for the exam. But in this video, I'm just giving some pointers. DAX is for caching DynamoDB, CloudFront for caching S3 contents. You may see some questions where you have to use this point. See, for DynamoDB, we always say caching is provided by DAX, but it is possible to use Elastic Cache also with DynamoDB. Just keep that in mind. You have Amazon Aurora with 15 read replicas. When you have to do a failover, what is the priority using which it will decide which read replica will be promoted? There are a couple of conditions, so try to understand what are those conditions. For example, the size of that read replica and the priority number which is already provided, etc. So please check that. Then this concept of Amazon Aurora Global Database. It is designed for globally distributed applications, allowing a single Aurora database to span multiple AWS regions. So have an idea about what is Aurora Global Database. With respect to networking between NACL and security group, NACL and security group, which is stateless and which is stateful, you should remember. Most likely you will see a question. And you should be very thorough with NACL versus security group differences. What does the default NACL and default security group allow or deny, and in which order the rules are evaluated, etc. You can expect questions from that area. Remember the function of NAT gateway, most likely you will get a question. Then VPC, definitely you will have a few questions. So thorough understanding of VPC will help you in the exam. So a suggestion is just try this exercise, take a pen and paper and draw a VPC with its subnets, CIDR address range, connectivity including direct connect, VPN, VPC peering, then virtual private gateway, customer gateway, NAT instance or gateway, DB instances, multiple EC2 instances behind an ELB, etc. Just try to draw that. It will give you a lot of idea about how the VPC is actually organized. That will help you in answering the questions about VPC. And how will you use your route table to ensure local routing or routing to NAT gateway, internet gateway, etc. So have some idea about that. And when you design that VPC, where will you put your VIP tier, application tier and DB tier? To ensure high availability, how many public private subnets do you need for this architecture. So just try to draw it. You may struggle with some of those concepts. You may get it wrong. That is fine. That will definitely improve your learning. So rather than just reading, if you try to take a pen and paper and try to design a VPC and all its components, you are going to learn much more than by just reading a book or reading a document. How do you ensure only your application tier EC2 instances can access your DB instances? So what is the arrangement you can do for that? How do you update NACL and security groups to achieve the desired security and access permissions? You should have idea about that. And yeah, I'm just reiterating that please try this out and design a VPC on paper. And you can expect a few questions regarding hybrid cloud architecture, meaning the connectivity from on-premises data center to AWS VPC. You should know about direct connectivity, site-to-site VPN, etc. So just read about that. And also have idea about Route 53 routing policies. You can expect a couple of questions. Definitely you can get questions about the various routing policies of Route 53. When it comes to storage, I can tell you that maybe perhaps the largest number of questions from any single service, that will be from S3. So be thorough with S3. And encryption at rest, the encryption methods used in S3, you will definitely have question. SSE-C, SSE-S3, SSE-KMS. Be thorough with the differences. You should be very clear about the differences in these encryption methods. So a typical scenario or question, the company wants to encrypt S3 data, but it does not want to provide its own encryption keys. Still wants to maintain an audit trail of when an encryption key was used and by whom. So in this particular scenario, you can only use SSE-KMS. Again, read about in which scenarios you can use all these three. And SSE-S3 does not provide the ability to audit trail the usage of the encryption keys, because if you are using SSE-S3, okay, there is a spelling mistake here, but never mind. If you are asking AWS to use SSE-S3, you are also asking AWS to manage the keys for you. You will not want to see the audit trail of who has accessed the encryption keys, etc. And remember, versioning of S3 buckets can only be suspended after enabling. It cannot be removed. So there may be some questions where this fact you need to remember while answering. Different versions of an object can have different retention modes and periods. So remember that. Understand what is Global Accelerator S3 Transfer Acceleration. It will help you in getting a couple of questions. CloudFront can use on-prem servers as custom origins. So many a times we may think that CloudFront can use only S3 as the origin. That is not true. Multi-part uploads for S3 and what are the limits. For example, if the object size is more than 5 GB, you have to use multi-part upload. So those kind of limits also you need to remember. And S3 lifecycle policy, what is it? And are there any invalid lifecycle transitions? You need to understand that. For example, you can transition from S3 standard to S3 standard infrequent access, but the reverse transitions may not be allowed. So please read about that. Storage gateway types, you will get at least one question. So read about that. Then cross-origin resource sharing. Again, you are going to get at least one question on that. Then because this is storage, we have EFS and EBS also here in this, not just S3. The files in EFS can be accessed in other AWS regions as well by using inter-region VPC peering connection. And just an interesting fact, if you provision an EBS volume of 100 GB, you will be charged for 100 GB irrespective of actual use. But for EFS and S3, charge is based on actual usage. Because of that, sometimes the EBS may prove costly. So just keep that in mind while answering some of the related questions. Importance of prefixes in S3 object names. Just try to find out how the prefixes can be used to improve the read capacity performance. And EBS volumes HDD backed and SSD backed, and HDD backed EBS volumes cannot be used as boot volume. And storage, one more slide. AWS Storage Gateway is a hybrid cloud storage service that gives you on-premises access to virtually unlimited cloud storage. And the three types of storage gateways are tape gateway, file gateway, and volume gateway. You will definitely get question on that. Prevent accidental deletion of objects from S3 bucket. You can use versioning, you can use MFA on delete, etc. So remember that. The open source Lustre file system is designed for high performance applications. So just remember where Lustre file system can be used. Serverless is an important section of services from AWS. You will definitely have a few questions from there. You must have idea about what are the serverless services and which are not. For example, S3, API Gateway, Lambda, SQS, SNS, all these are serverless services. some questions may need you to select fully serverless solution. So in that case, you should know which is serverless, which is not serverless. And that question can be very easy if you have that idea. Then if any streaming data is coming in, most of the times you will have to use Kinesis. And Kinesis Firehose, it cannot directly write into a DynamoDB table. It usually writes into S3, Redshift or Splunk, some third-party applications. If the answer choice says Firehose will directly write to DynamoDB table, that will be wrong. And API gateway can create different types of APIs. Some of the APIs are stateless, some of them are stateful. Try to understand which is stateless, which is stateful. If a question talks about reducing management overhead or maintenance effort, you better opt for a serverless solution or look for serverless components in the choices and then select the answer accordingly. You can use Kinesis Data Firehose with an intermediary Lambda function to filter and transform the incoming stream before the output is dumped on S3. So that is the only processing which Kinesis Data Firehose does, because otherwise it is just pumping data from the source to the destination. And IAM, you will definitely have a few questions. Please remember the concept of the principle of least privilege, what it means. You may see a question regarding that, and you should know how to read a policy. Okay, just take a policy and understand what is a resource, just try to understand allow, deny, resource, principle, etc. So you should know how to read a policy. You may have a question. Be clear about IAM role. You will definitely have questions, 1 or 2 questions. Again, question will not be that, okay, give me the definition of IAM role. Question will be about a scenario where you have to choose IAM role to achieve that particular business scenario. Then please understand what is permissions boundary, and related to that, service control policy, which is used in AWS organization, that is also important. When it comes to security, please remember that if you delete a KMS key, it will be in the pending deletion status for a few days, and hence you can cancel the CMK deletion and recover the key. Sometimes you accidentally deleted CMK key and then later realize that you really need that key. So it will be in pending deletion status, so you can recover that. And WAF, or Web Application Firewall, allows you to restrict application access based on the geographic location of your users. Amazon GuardDuty, always it comes with the keyword. In the question you may see the keyword intelligent threat detection. Basically, GuardDuty uses machine learning to monitor any malicious activity on data stored in S3. Or not only that, GuardDuty in general, it analyzes logs from different services and it can identify any potential malicious activity. So intelligent threat detection, that will be the keyword. Okay, GuardDuty can analyze billions of events across multiple data sources such as CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, DNS logs, etc. And Amazon Inspector can be used for security assessments to check for vulnerabilities on your applications running in the EC2 instances. So many times people get confused between Amazon Inspector versus GuardDuty versus Shield versus WAF, etc. So you need to be clear about that. And when you are writing the exam, please look for keywords in the question such as cost effective, highly available, durable, frequently accessed, etc. And that will hold the clue when 2 answers are close. So please keep an eye on that. Many times people just forget about these keywords. They will just look at the question. The first choice they will see, okay, that suits, okay, they will choose that. But if you look at this, maybe you will realize that maybe A is also correct, B is also correct, but B is more cost effective. And during the exam, this is just my suggestion, you can decide. You may skip long questions, multi-answer questions in the first pass, because chance of those questions going wrong or chance of those questions taking more time are high. Because of that, it is better you just skip these questions in the first pass and you can come back to them later. And as far as I remember, out of the 65 questions, I think some 15 questions had 2 answers and 3 questions had 3 answers, but that may vary for different candidates, but just keep that in mind. I'm not saying all the long questions need to be parked or all the multi-answer questions need to be parked. If you get a feel from the first line itself that, okay, it is going to be simple, just go ahead with that. And it's a 2-hour exam. So in 2 hours, my suggestion is you should complete the first pass by 75 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes, and should have completed at least 45 questions in that first pass. And remaining 20 questions, maybe you can take the remaining 45 minutes. Again, this is not a rule. I'm not saying this is the best practice. I'm just saying it from my experience of taking multiple AWS certification exams. Okay, so we have discussed some of those frequently asked question topic areas. I hope you will get questions from all these topics which I have mentioned. And once you complete the exam, please come back here and add your comments in the comment box about how useful was it. And also you can give your suggestions to other viewers of this video. And I'm sure many of you were waiting for this solution architect certification because in your appraisal, your manager has asked you to complete it, or maybe you had just lost out on a promotion or just lost out on a good salary hike last time because you had not done this certification. So this time, please go ahead and complete it. And once you complete it, just take a printout of that certification and go to your boss's room and just throw it at his or her face. Because you did not pass the certification, you lost the promotion. So I think you can do that. But if you forget to take the printout, don't open the certificate in your phone and then throw the phone at his face. You may lose your phone and you may lose your job as well. I'm not responsible for that. Okay, so hopefully all of you will clear the exam, you will get the promotion, you will get the salary hike, and all of us will live happily thereafter. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you. Bye.